On the 31st of May, 2017, Ubisoft unveiled their new logo, ending the life of their previous design they'd used for the past 14 years. This to me is an attempt for the game publisher to rebrand their image into a specifically more trustworthy company looking to the future. In the video I made last week, I dedicated about a minute purely to roast Ubisoft, which is why it may seem strange for me to be here defending the publisher. However, I think many people don't understand the extent that Ubisoft is going to, in order to patch up the worn down reputation it's gained over the past few years. Let's first start all the way back in February 2016 with the release of Far Cry Primal. Announced only 5 months before its release, this game was determined to explore a bold new setting that hadn't been seen tackled by a AAA developer in recent memory. And with the announcement of the first Watch Dogs game being a full 2 years before the release date, it was an excellent surprise to have a game released less than half a year after it was first teased. Also, with many game fans at the time getting worn out by a huge number of futuristic shooters, it was a refreshing change of pace to explore an open world set 10,000 years in the past, and a daring move to dump millions into developing a game when this new concept could have been outright rejected by its customers. Fast forward a year later, and it seems as though Ubisoft reserves the month of February to release their more experimental and unproven projects with the release of For Honor. Having recently jumped back in and played for a few rounds, it's easy to appreciate the risk in tackling this undersaturated genre. However, the gameplay does seem to be heavily weighted in favor of the veteran players, as there are still some points of a match where a single good player is able to spawn camp an entire 4-man team. However, the game at the very core is a fighting game, which are notoriously hard to balance for both newcomers and veterans. We now move on to the first Watch Dogs game. Widely considered to be a letdown by the majority of players, I believe it was the victim of two unfortunate factors. The first, as mentioned before, was that there was a 2-year gap between first being announced and its release date. Having over 700 days of hype after the E3 trailers looked so impressive gave the game a reputation that it could never hope to live up to. However, this wasn't the biggest threat to this new franchise. On October 15, 2013, just over a month before its expected release date, Ubisoft announced that Watch Dogs would be postponed for another 6 months. One could not imagine why they would suddenly decide to give up this prime holiday season slot and instead opt for the middle of the following year. I guess none of us will ever know. In short, I believe Watch Dogs was not a bad game by any means. However, the story of the first Watch Dogs is the equivalent of your friend bragging to you that they are an amazing singer for 2 years before being forced to sing in front of millions of people right after Elton John, Michael Jackson, and Freddie Mercury were walking off stage. This kind of overhype was destructive to Ubisoft in the long term. By the time Watch Dogs 2 was released, it was reported that sales were only 20% of that of the first game in the UK. Although being monumentally better than its predecessor, consumers were unwilling to trust a franchise that had previously overhyped and underdelivered. I can only imagine that the marketing team was pulled aside and told to be worse at their job. Say what you want about Ubisoft, but in recent years they've been more than willing to include sensitive or often risky subject matter. With the upcoming release of Far Cry 5, that has idiots getting triggered, to being able to murder George Washington in Assassin's Creed 3 DLC, to outright beating the shit out of the Pope in Assassin's Creed 2, Ubisoft hasn't been one to compromise creative freedom to appease dumbasses. Also, being willing to touch the South Park franchise with a 10-foot pole further proves its willingness to take calculated risks. The move that made me realize Ubisoft was getting serious about its reputation was when it was announced that after yearly releases from 2009 to 2015, the Assassin's Creed franchise would take a year off to re-evaluate itself and to give the team more time to make a bigger and better game in the series. The willingness to sub out their publisher's flagship franchise makes a huge statement that the company as a whole wants to address the fatigue its customers have been experiencing, and that they truly want to put quality over quantity in their list of priorities. From what we currently know about Assassin's Creed Origins, it looks as though they've decided to take a lot of pages out of The Witcher 3. From the reinvented combat system to the RPG elements and the commitment to make the game feel bigger and more expansive, the development team is clearly trying to create something fans have not been expecting. This is without simply filling the map with useless collectibles, like they did in Assassin's Creed Unity. That map was an absolute clusterfuck. Assassin's Creed Origins will not live up to The Witcher 3, as the budget and time frame just doesn't allow it to reach these ambitious heights. But I'll happily bet that this will be the best Assassin's Creed we've gotten to play in at least 5 years. I only wish that other annualized franchises are able to be bold enough to give themselves a year off in order to reinvent what they are. However, this is something I'm most certainly not going to bet on. Perhaps the best example of Ubisoft's commitment to improve its image is the story of Rainbow Six Siege. Due to constant content updates, thousands of bug fixes, and an announced commitment to support the game into the distant future, Rainbow Six has recently grown to a monumental 20 million registered players since its release at the end of 2015, which for comparison is 25% more than what the legendary Modern Warfare sold. To those who don't know, the Rainbow Six team recently made an announcement that I myself couldn't quite believe. They are now aiming to have 100 operators added into the game, which is a big holy shit moment for those who have been playing since the beginning. With the current amount of operators and the current rate that they've been added, this means that it will take Ubisoft roughly 8 years to hit this milestone. Now it's impossible to say whether the development team are actually going to commit to such a long time frame. However, it's good to see that Rainbow Six is being treated as more of a platform like Overwatch that will be built upon, as opposed to making a sequel. Ubisoft wants Siege to be goddamn massive. As much as I personally criticize publishers for releasing games when they are not entirely finished, I can't help but admire Ubisoft for going far above what anyone expected to make Siege one of the most unique and enjoyable shooters currently out there. I understand that many viewers are probably still skeptical about everything I've talked about over the past few minutes. Many will probably accuse me of being paid by Ubisoft, but I think in an age where there is so much criticism for big publishers, I think it's about time we talked about how some of them have been genuinely trying to improve their reputation, even when for the most part it's gone entirely unnoticed. But for those who are going to tell me to go fuck myself anyway, feel free to do so on my Discord server. Stop by to ask me questions, post memes on my slow typing speed, and talk to other degenerate fucks who also like this kind of content. I'm sure you'll fit right in. This concludes a video where I do my best to convince viewers that Ubisoft is genuinely trying to change its reputation and business practices for the better. Subscribe for more videos on nothing in particular, but until next time, have fun and embrace the bullshit.